Welcome back to another deep dive. It's December 8th, 2024. Picking up where we left off in our last deep dive into the finances of Florida State Representative Randy Fine.
Oh, yeah.
With the primary coming up.
Uh-huh.
On January 28th. This is really relevant.
Yeah.
Last time we kind of explored his considerable wealth.
Right.
From those casino ventures.
Yes.
And his, let's just say interesting views on how average folks are handling inflation these days.
Interesting, for sure. Yeah, what I think is fascinating to me is how much deeper this rabbit hole goes.
Oh, really?
So today, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, and we're going to focus on Fine's political action committee. It's called Friends of Randy Fine.
Okay.
And how he's using the money flowing through it. His public financial disclosures really do paint a vivid picture, to say the least.
Okay, so when we say we're talking about his finances, we're not talking about his regular campaign account.
Right.
This is PAC money, which I guess comes with different rules.
Exactly. And the sheer volume of spending from this PAC is what initially caught my eye. Over $697,000 has been spent from Friends of Randy Fine.
Wow.
Which actually eclipses the $504,000 spent from his actual election campaign account.
Wow, that's a staggering difference.
Yeah.
And all of this is public record, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you and I aren't privy to some secret stash of documents or something like that, are we?
No, not at all. All of this information is readily available on the Florida Department of State website. In fact, we'll be sure to include that link in the show notes.
Perfect.
So you can explore the records yourself.
Transparency is key.
Yes.
Especially when we're talking about numbers this big.
Yeah.
So let's get into the specifics. What exactly is Randy Fine spending all this PAC money on?
Well, let's just say fine dining would be an understatement.
Okay.
We're talking $14,791 categorized as entertainment. At some pretty swanky places.
Oh.
We're talking the Bellagio, the Venetian in Las Vegas, Disney tickets, high-end steakhouses. It seems like someone's been enjoying the good life.
I mean, entertainment is a pretty broad term, though, right?
True.
I mean, you could have a campaign rally and technically call that entertainment, right?
True, but the context here paints a different picture.
Okay.
And it gets even more intriguing when you see entries like $9,107 for entertainment involving a certain Samantha Blair.
Okay.
She's a former Tampa Bay cheerleader who now runs a political consulting firm. And her firm, Capital Campaign Group, received another $10,450.
Wait a minute. So almost $20,000 in entertainment and consulting fees for a former cheerleader turned political consultant.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, my curiosity is piqued.
It's certainly an eyebrow-raising detail, especially when you consider the broader economic context,
Yeah.
While many Floridians are struggling to afford basic necessities, these expenses seem, a bit out of touch.
Yeah. I mean, that's a bit jarring, to say the least.
Yeah.
And this pattern doesn't stop there, though, does it?
Not at all. There's a $547 fuel expense, which is curious, considering Fine drives a Tesla and presumably charges it to his account.
Right.
And then there's his $6,451 to reimburse himself for a Las Vegas fundraising trip, suspiciously timed during the same week as that $9,000 entertainment expense with Samantha Blair.
So while folks back home are cutting back on groceries, he's off to Vegas.
Yeah.
That's not exactly a message that resonates with the average voter, I don't think.
It certainly raises questions about priorities.
Yeah.
And optics.
Yeah. Right.
But this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, no.
We haven't even touched on the $47,553 in legal fees, the $5,800 on luxury hotels like the Gaylord Palms, the Venetian again, and the Ritz-Carlton, or the nearly almost $8,000 on individual meals.
Hold on. Nearly $8,000 on individual meals.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy a nice dinner as much as the next person.
Right.
But this is, taxpayer money we're talking about, right?
Well, not directly taxpayer money, but money donated to his PAC, presumably to support his political activities.
Right.
So the question is, are these extravagant dinners really justifiable as necessary campaign expenses?
It just seems like there's a disconnect somewhere.
Yeah.
Between these expenditures and the needs of everyday Floridians who are feeling the pinch of inflation right now.
Yeah.
Like you said.
Yeah.
And it gets even more perplexing when you consider that on top of all of this, he's reimbursed himself over $31,000.
Yeah.
For vaguely described expenses.
Yeah.
So there's $6,243 for entertainment. Again, with the entertainment. Another $10,306 to reimburse Samantha Blair for expenses, $1,000 for a Bush event reimbursement, No details on which Bush or what event that was. Then $5,637 for expenses, and finally another $5,500 for a conference expense.
Right.
So on top of the Vegas trips and the fancy dinners, there's over $31,000 in personally pocketed reimbursements
Yeah.
with almost no explanation. I mean, that's a level of financial opaqueness that would make even the most seasoned accountant raise an eyebrow.
Transparency and accountability seem to be recurring themes here, or rather, the lack thereof.
Right.
And remember, this is all happening against the backdrop of an upcoming election where voters will decide whether to entrust fine with another term.
You've definitely painted a picture that I think a lot of voters will find concerning.
What's particularly interesting is that some individuals listed on Fine's fundraising committee have actually requested their names be removed.
Really?
But guess what?
Right.
He hasn't complied.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
People want off the Randy Fine train that badly.
It certainly seems that way. And it makes you wonder, what do these individuals know that's making them distance themselves from Fine and his fundraising activities? It's almost as if they've gotten a glimpse behind the curtain and didn't like what they saw.
This is getting more intriguing by the minute. And to think, he's holding another fundraiser tomorrow at the O'Galley Yacht Club. I can only imagine what kind of entertainment expenses will emerge from that event.
It does make you wonder. And it also raises the question, if this is how he handles campaign finances, what does it say about his priorities and judgment when it comes to representing the people of his district?
That's a question I think a lot of voters will be asking themselves as we approach the primary on January 28th.
And that, my friend, is exactly why we're doing this deep dive.
Well said.
Yeah.
We'll be back after a short break.
Yeah.
To delve deeper into the potential legal and ethical implications of these financial choices and discuss what voters can do to hold their elected officials accountable. Stay tuned.
Yes.
We're back and ready to unpack some of the broader implications of Randy Fine's spending habits. We've laid out the facts, and now it's time to analyze what this all means. Not just for Fine himself, but for Florida politics as a whole.
You know what strikes me? It's the stark contrast between Fine's lavish expenditures and the economic realities faced by many Floridians. We're talking about a time when people are making tough choices at the grocery store, cutting back on essentials and struggling to make ends meet. And here we have a state representative living it up in Vegas, dropping thousands on entertainment.
Yeah, it's a disconnect that's hard to ignore, and I think it speaks to a larger issue in politics today. You know, are elected officials truly in touch with the needs and concerns of their constituents?
Right.
Or are they operating in a bubble of privilege and self-interest?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in this case, the evidence points to a concerning lack of awareness.
Right.
Or empathy.
Yeah, and it's not just about optics, though. This goes beyond bad taste, you know. There are potentially serious legal and ethical implications here.
Absolutely. While Florida's campaign finance laws do allow for some leeway, there are clear limits on personal use of funds. And some of these expenditures, particularly those vaguely described expenses Fine keeps reimbursing himself for, definitely raise red flags. It begs the question, is this truly a case of sloppy bookkeeping, or is something more nefarious going on?
I mean, is this level of, shall we say, creative accounting? Is this something that you see often in Florida politics? Or is Randy Fine an outlier?
Sadly, it's not as uncommon as it should be. Lax campaign finance regulations and a lack of enforcement create an environment where this kind of behavior can flourish, but that doesn't make it right, and it certainly shouldn't be something voters simply accept.
So what can voters do about it?
Yeah.
How do we move beyond outrage and actually hold these elected officials accountable?
Well, first and foremost, be informed.
Okay.
Don't just rely on campaign slogans and flashy ads. Take the time to research candidates, delve into their financial disclosures, and ask tough questions about their spending habits. Remember, these campaigns are funded by your donations.
Right.
You have a right to know where your money is going.
But let's be real. Most people don't have the time
Right.
or the expertise to decipher these complex financial reports.
Right.
I mean, they're often deliberately opaque and confusing.
You're right. And that's why it's crucial to support organizations dedicated to promoting campaign finance reform and greater transparency.
Okay.
Groups like the Brennan Center for Justice, Common Cause, and the League of Women Voters are doing fantastic work in this area. They provide resources, advocate for stricter regulations, and hold politicians accountable.
So we can donate to these organizations, volunteer our time, and spread the word about the importance of campaign finance reform.
Uh-huh.
But what about direct action? What can we do to pressure our elected representatives to clean up this mess?
We can contact our representatives and demand they take concrete steps to close loopholes, increase transparency, and enforce existing regulations. We need to make it clear that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior.
The upcoming primary is a perfect opportunity to send that message.
Right.
Voters need to make informed choices and support candidates who prioritize integrity and accountability.
Exactly. This isn't just about Randy Fine. It's about the future of Florida politics and the kind of representation we deserve. Do we want leaders who prioritize self-enrichment and lavish spending, or those who are truly committed to serving the needs of their constituents?
That's a powerful question, and I think the answer is clear. We need to demand better, and we need to start by holding our elected officials accountable for their actions.
Well said. Remember, your vote is your voice. Make it count.
We'll be right back after a short break to explore some specific examples of fine spending that raise the biggest red flags and discuss what questions voters should be asking candidates before heading to the polls. Don't go away. Okay, we're back, and I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about the questionable spending.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture here for a moment. What does this whole situation with Randy Fine tell us about the state of Florida politics?
Well, it's a microcosm of a larger problem, frankly.
Yeah.
This lack of transparency,
Right.
the sense of entitlement,
Yeah.
the disconnect between politicians and the people they're supposed to represent.
Right.
It's unfortunately not unique to Randy Fine. We've seen similar patterns with other politicians, not just in Florida, but across the country.
So how do we fix it?
Yeah.
We talked about being informed voters, researching candidates, supporting campaign finance reform organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But is that enough?
It's a start, but it's going to take a fundamental shift in our political culture, we need to stop accepting this kind of behavior as business as usual.
Right.
We need to demand better from our elected officials, and we need to hold them accountable when they fall short.
I think there's a growing sense of frustration out there
Right.
among voters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People are tired of feeling like their voices aren't being heard,
Mm-hmm.
their needs aren't being met, and that their elected officials are more interested in self-preservation than public service.
You're absolutely right. And that frustration is understandable,
Yeah.
but it needs to be channeled into constructive action,
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't just sit back and complain. We need to get involved,
Right.
make our voices heard, and demand change.
And the upcoming primary on January 28th is a perfect opportunity to do just that. Voters have a chance to send a clear message that they won't tolerate this kind of behavior.
Exactly. Don't just vote for the name you recognize or the party you usually align with. Do your research. Look at their track record. Scrutinize their financial disclosures.
Right.
And ask yourself, does this candidate truly represent my interests?
Right.
Are they someone I can trust to use their power responsibly and ethically?
Yeah. It's about taking back our democracy. It's about reminding our elected officials that they work for us, the people.
And that we won't stand for anything less than integrity, transparency, and accountability.
Well said. Well, I think this deep dive has been eye-opening, to say the least. It's a stark reminder that we can't take our democracy for granted. We need to be informed, engaged, and vigilant.
Absolutely. And we need to remember that change starts with each one of us.
Right.
So stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay active. Your vote is your voice. Make it count.
And that concludes our deep dive into the curious case of Randy Fine's campaign finances. We hope this episode has empowered you to be a more informed and engaged citizen. Remember, the future of Florida politics is in your hands.